In my line of work, as you can imagine, I get asked all the time, do you have an EV? And I don't. And here's why. Not that I've got all the answers, but it might help inform you in your search of yours. Perhaps number one of all my reasons is that this is a lousy time to buy any car unless you have to. With supply chain issues, with inflation, and with what's going on with kind of some weird new market dynamics out there, changing from combustion to electric models, this is a really expensive time to buy a new or used car. I don't relish getting in line to pay top dollar for something which depreciates. Compounding that point is the fact that I generally try not to buy new cars. I love lightly used, well cared for, late model used cars. It's just a really smart way to buy. However, I do acknowledge that you've got to be pretty flexible in what kind of car you're going to get. You don't just pick what you want or configure and order it. And you have to realize that there are some additional headaches with any used car. You're buying down the trough, if you will, and often someone else's problems become yours. But overall, I do really well with late model used cars, and there are not enough electrics in history for that to be a really robust market just yet. Oh, by the way, when I do buy a used EV, which I probably will, I'm not going to be too concerned about the fact that it'll have some depreciated range on its battery. That's fine by me. See my piece recently about a reality check for how much range you really need? It's less than you think. My next concern is there has to be something more than Tesla, right? Tesla makes some great cars. However, I know there are a whole bunch of more great cars from great car makers coming, and some are on the market now. General Motors and Hyundai and Kia are just some examples, but we're about to see a lot of other shoes drop. I just feel like it's still a little early, and we're going to see a lot of other definitions and visions of the market than just the company that's done so far. Now, along those lines, I've covered a lot of technology revolutions in my career, and one thing I've noticed, in their first 7 to maybe 10 years, they're typified by some real cutting-edge leaders and convulsive innovation, and then you settle into 3, maybe 4 leaders, really more like 3, that have almost equally good products that do all about the same thing, and the differences end up being minor. That's the kind of healthy, competitive, robust market that I like to spend my own money in when I'm buying tech. We do not have that right now. That requires some patience. 18 to 24 months, you're going to have a completely different landscape of really credible cars to consider. Now, when it comes to charging, I'm not terribly concerned. I live in a single-family home. I would install a level 2 charge connector, and I'd be good to go. Although there are some interesting new rumblings out there that we should spend more time charging during the day at public locations, not focus so much on overnight charging at our home location. This was the big thrust of an interesting new study coming out of Stanford not too long ago. It found that there are real benefits to the stability and the greenness of the grid if we charge that way, and not just at home at night. It rattles around the back of my mind, and I think, it's not a bad thing to take advantage of tomorrow's infrastructure if that's part of my strategy of waiting a little longer. Then there are a couple of conundrums that are always kind of nagging at the back of my mind. The 2 big setbacks. You typically buy an EV because you want to reduce emissions and reduce your cost per mile of driving, right? Great ideas. Except up front for the first year or 2 or maybe longer, you actually are putting more emissions in the environment and spending more money. More emissions because you caused a car to be manufactured and all of its materials to be produced and shipped, assembled, and then shipped to you. There's a notable and real carbon load there. And you're spending more money because, well, let's face it, you went out and bought a car that you probably didn't really need. That could be tens of thousands of dollars that you have to earn back, $5 a gallon at a time, if you will. So I'm not saying that buying an EV should be put off forever, because these arguments will never go away. On the other hand, I do like taking my time to wait for the points that I just mentioned to help offset these 2 conundrums. Now here's a tech concern that has me on the sidelines a little bit. Solid-state batteries. They are said to be arriving in 3, maybe 5 years at scale in production cars. Now, that's a bit of a bet because they're not imminent yet. But when they do, they are promising as much as a 40% reduction in carbon footprint. They are promising to give you a better, faster charge, 80% in 15 minutes in many cases, and also allowing cars to use a smaller battery to get current range, which is usually ample, meaning the car can continue to work on being lighter as well as being less expensive. I don't think this is going to be a huge hang-up for most buyers. It's a little bit of a prospective bet, but then again, you also don't want to be the last person who bought a laptop with nickel metal hydrides. The new rules for federal incentives got broader and tighter at the same time. See my piece explaining all the details, but the bottom line is most watchers have analyzed it and say something like 70% of EVs will not qualify for the next year or two for a federal tax incentive, or at least a full incentive, based on where their materials came from, or where they were assembled, or what their sticker price is. There's a whole lot of new hurdles the car has to jump to get the full $7,500 federal credit. The good news is there's now also a $4,000 used EV credit, but again, it's a more complicated minefield to qualify for. I want to see more models hit the market that hit all the marks to get the full tax credit. Here's a simple one. I drive a lot less since COVID, and I always will at this point. Things have changed. That means an electric car's benefits have far fewer miles upon which to act, upon which to pay off, than they would have just 2 or so short years ago. Maybe that's the case for you as well. This one's kind of big and nebulous, but I don't like single points of failure. And as we are electrifying our society, for good reasons, that's what we're driving toward. I'm kind of uncomfortable with my car getting into that basket as well, along with so many systems in homes and everywhere else. I will never not have 1 or 2, or right now 4 combustion engine cars. I have too many driving styles, trip types, and vehicle types that I like having access to. An EV is going to fit in that portfolio, but it's not going to replace them. Okay, at this point I've made the heads of Teslarati and tree huggers and coal rollers all explode. But this is just what I think about, and I spend a lot of time looking at and thinking about vehicles when I wonder, when will I buy an EV? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But maybe this will help give you a little additional information and perspective as you work through a bunch of issues. Many of these I'm sure you're thinking about, and maybe a few that you hadn't.